Hi, I'm Gabriel, and this is Learning English Path. And in this lesson, I'm going to teach you metaphors we live by and metaphors we learn by. All that is transitory is but a metaphor. That's a quote by Goethe. Now, I am so excited about this lesson because what I am about to teach you can take your English to whole new levels that you didn't think was possible in a time that you didn't think was possible. If you grasp what it is that I'm teaching you today, and you apply it, I guarantee that you will be able to learn English much faster, much better, and much deeper. So that you not just understand the words and what the expressions and what the grammar, what all that means, but you understand the system itself. The whole system of the English language will become much clearer to you if you take what I teach you today and you apply it to your English learning, to your studies. Does it sound too good to be true? Too far-fetched? Maybe, but keep watching and you will find out that it's not, and that actually what I'm telling you can transform the entire way that you learn English, okay? So before I get into the lesson, I do just want to encourage you that if you learn anything from this lesson, and I'm sure you will, it will exceed your expectations. But if you do learn anything, please give it a like, because the more English learners who can find this lesson, the more of a society full of English learners we can have, and people who are able to communicate with each other, right? Give it a like and subscribe so that you continue your learning English path. Okay, what is a metaphor? I'm going to read you the dictionary definition of a metaphor. A metaphor is a word, phrase, or term that is used instead of the literal meaning in order to show a likeness. Okay, so I'll explain that a little now. So a word or a phrase or a term, right, that is used instead of the literal meaning. Now, when we say literal meaning, that is when what you say is exactly what happened. So if I say, I jumped, then that literally means I jumped, okay? Or if I say, I held 4 fingers up, then I literally held 4 fingers up, right? So why would we not speak literally? What a metaphor is something that is not literal. So we do this in order to show a likeness. So we say something else to show that it is like this. Okay, that's what a metaphor is. Now, it seems to most people, even native English speakers, it seems like this is just for literary purposes, right? This is things in books, right? Things you read about metaphors in poetry. There are metaphors, and in fiction books, right? That's where metaphor is used. That's what most people think. But the fact is that metaphors are embedded not just in the English language, but in I think all languages that have been studied. Embedded in our speech everywhere. Now, particularly in the English language, metaphors, there was a study, a university study, I can't remember when, but there was a university study that showed that a metaphor was used every 16 words. Not every 16 days, not every 16 hours, not every 16 conversations, not even every 16 sentences. Every 16 words, someone used a metaphor. Now, native speakers, if you ask them how many times in a day do you use a metaphor, they would probably not say every 16 words, right? But that's the truth, they do. Now, the rest of this lesson, I need to point out, is highly influenced by a book called Metaphors We Live By. And that was written by George Lakoff and Mark Johnson. And I've read this book 3 times now. Every time it's incredible. It's so incredible it blows my mind. See, that's a metaphor. So this book has opened my eyes to not just how we use metaphors in language, but how we think every day, how we think of the world in this, through the metaphorical concepts that we live by. Now, I will explain what I mean here. But I wanted to give credit where credit is due. So that book, if you can get this book and understand this book, it could change your whole life. Okay, Metaphors We Live by George Lakoff and Mark Johnson. It was written in 2003, and it's an incredible piece of work. And what I want to do is I want to use what they found in this book to teach you English, the English language. And not only to teach you the English language, but to teach you how to learn the English language in such a way that you can become more conscious of your everyday experience of life. This is possible. This is possible. Okay? So, here's an example of a very common saying that is just a metaphor that you may not have thought before. Oh yeah, that's a metaphor. Okay? I'm falling in love with you. I'm falling in love with you. This is a metaphor, okay? Because I am not literally falling at all. And I can't actually, literally be in love, because love is an abstract concept, right? But we need to be able to conceptualize, right? We need to be able to think about this abstract concept of love, this emotion and this feeling, it's both an emotion and a feeling and an abstract concept, we need to be able to think of love in a certain conceptual framework, right? So we understand and express a feeling in terms of what it is like, okay? Certain similarities it has with something else. That's how we understand it. And how we understand this concept is often revealed in the metaphors that we use in language. Okay, and perhaps the metaphorical language that we use also influences how we think about this concept. Okay, so it goes both ways, you see, and it's a debate for another day which one is more powerful. But what I want you to understand is that the language that we use really shows how we perceive the concepts themselves that we are talking about, right? The subjects. So in this sentence, I'm falling in love with you. What is it that's being revealed here, right? Because I'm not literally falling. So what we're doing is we are showing how it's similar to a feeling that we have had in the past, falling, right? When we're falling, we don't have control over what's happening. We don't have control over where we're going. But more importantly, falling is something within space, and we are familiar with space, right? Now, love, because it's an abstract concept and a feeling, it's not something that really occurs in space, but it's easier for us to understand and conceptualize and express love when we think of it in terms of space, right? That's why the metaphor is in love. So to be in a contained space of love, right? In a space that contains love. I'm falling in love with. So people don't consciously think about these abstract concepts occurring in space, but what the metaphors reveal is that unconsciously that's how we understand these abstract concepts. That's how we are processing the concepts in our minds. And when you are able to see that in language, you are also able to understand a lot more language much easier, okay? So there are two kinds of metaphors that we are going to look at: structural metaphors and orientational metaphors. A structural metaphor is saying that one thing is like another thing. And an orientational metaphor gives us a concept of a spatial relationship. Okay, first we're going to look at structural metaphors. Now I'm about to give you a list of examples of structural metaphors. And what I want you to understand is that these examples are not examples of metaphors that you will hear people using on a daily basis. Okay, these are not like expressions or idioms or phrases. These are metaphors that are conceptual. These metaphors dictate the way people perceive these concepts. Okay, these are the conceptual metaphors we live by in the mind. And from those conceptual metaphors, that's where all the language comes out. Okay, that's how we know how to talk about these subjects. Okay, so here's the list. Argument is war. Time is money. Relationship is a journey. Significance is size. Theories are buildings. The mind is a machine. Meanings are objects. A lesson is an object. Emotions are locations. Actions are containers. Jobs are containers. Hobbies are containers. The creator is the creation. A country is a person. A language is a person. Speech is a person. History is a path. Beliefs are fashions. Anger is heat. Change is motion. Desire is hunger. Ideas are food. Intelligence is light. Sex is a weapon. Society is a body. Hope is a child. Life is a journey. Learning is eating. Opportunities are open paths. This is only the tip of the iceberg. This is only a little bit, just some of them. There are many, many more, okay? Now, the key to learning English by understanding these metaphors is that you can take the subject, right, the first word in each metaphor, and apply language that you might use with the second part of the metaphor, right? So I'm going to give you 3 more detailed examples here. So the first one, argument is war. Okay, how is this shown in our language? How are these metaphors, how is this metaphor revealed to us in language? Argument is war. He attacked everything I said. That was a poor strategy. Who won the argument? You disagree? Okay, shoot. He destroyed me with his argument. Now, think about that. He attacked everything I said. So, he didn't literally attack anything physically, right? But we have this conceptual metaphor in our minds that says argument is war, which means that we understand what is happening when we argue. We understand that in the same terms as war. And so we understand it in the same language too. So when someone says he attacked everything I said, then we understand what that means because we are applying it. We are applying the rules of war to the rules of argument, right? The linguistic rules. We're applying that set of words, that set of expressions. we're applying that to argument too. Now, I want to read you a direct quote from the book, Metaphors We Live By, because this part is very interesting. Okay, so this is a long quote, but listen. It will be valuable to you. It is important to see that we don't just talk about arguments in terms of war. We can actually win or lose arguments. We see the person we are arguing with as an opponent. We attack his positions and we defend our own. We gain and lose ground. We plan and use strategies. If we find a position indefensible, we can abandon it and take a new line of attack. Many of the things we do in arguing are partially structured by the concept of war. Though there is no physical battle, there is a verbal battle, and the structure of an argument, attack, defense, counterattack, etc., reflects this. It is in this sense that the argument is war metaphor is one that we live by in this culture. It structures the actions we perform in arguing. Try to imagine a culture where arguments are not viewed in terms of war, where no one wins or loses, where there is no sense of attacking or defending, gaining or losing ground. Imagine a culture where an argument is viewed as a dance. The participants are seen as performers, and the goal is to perform in a balanced and aesthetically pleasing way. In such a culture, people would view arguments differently, experience them differently, carry them out differently, and talk about them differently. But we would probably not view them as arguing at all. They would simply be doing something different. It would seem strange even to call what they were doing arguing. Perhaps the most neutral way of describing this difference between their culture and ours would be to say that we have a discourse form structured in terms of battle, and they have one structured in terms of dance. Quite sensational repercussions there. Right? Not only do metaphors clearly influence our thinking, not only are we clearly connecting one concept, the concept of arguing, to war, but we see this in our language. It's reflected in our language, and most people are very unconscious of this, right? So, let me give you a couple more examples. No more big quotes, though. Don't worry. All right. Time is money. Time is money. How did you spend your time yesterday? Don't waste your time on that. This lesson can save you lots of time. I'm running out of time. You need to invest a lot of time into this. That mistake cost me 4 hours. All right, another one. Ideas are food, or learning is eating. That idea gives me food for thought. Let me chew on that for a while. That's a half-baked idea. The teacher spoon-fed the students. She has an appetite for learning English. He devoured the book. it will take you time to digest this lesson. All right, so how can you really apply this to learning English? You might be thinking, okay, Gabriel, this is very interesting, but how is this really going to help me? Right? I don't have time to learn all of these different expressions you're talking about. Well, because I don't want you to learn the expressions. I want you to learn the metaphors. So, when you hear an expression, right? Let's say you hear the expression, that's a half-baked idea, okay? That's a half-baked idea. You need to ask yourself this question. You need to ask yourself, what is the conceptual metaphor here? What is the conceptual metaphor here? How is this person viewing, perceiving my idea? Right? If you say, oh, I have an idea, and then you tell the person the idea, and then the person says, that's a half-baked idea, how are they understanding the concept of an idea when they say that's a half-baked idea? What you can do is you can ask yourself, what would the person say if they were just speaking literally? If they were just speaking literally and there was no metaphor involved, right? Because you can see that that expression is not literal. So if you hear an expression that's not literal, you ask yourself, how would you say that literally? And what is left reveals the conceptual metaphor, right? The subject is idea, and if you think of half-baked, well, that means that I haven't thought the idea through yet. I haven't thought about it enough, right? That's what it means. So he used the metaphor half-baked. That's about food. So that must mean that he has a conceptual metaphor. Ideas are food, right? So that's how you can learn some of these metaphors, by listening to the expressions that people use and then thinking, okay, what is the metaphor here? What is the conceptual metaphor here? And then when you know the conceptual metaphor, guess what? You can apply it to many other expressions. This can really transform your English language learning. Do you know how significant this is? Do you know how big what I'm telling you right now is? Right? When you understand that metaphors are really at the heart of our language because it reveals the whole system, then you can learn so much more and you can make all sorts of connections, right? So when you understand that there's a metaphor, time is money, you can ask yourself, well, what else do I know about money? What else do I know about money? And you can literally draw a mind map and brainstorm all the expressions and all the words that are relevant to money, literally. Okay, so money, something costs money. So you can think, oh, cost. Can I apply that expression to time? You think, yes, I can. Or try it out. Try saying to someone, it costs time. And you'll find that, yes, that is an expression. So you see, when you learn a metaphor, you learn many, many, many expressions at once. And you learn not only the expressions, but how people in Western culture view the subject of what you're talking about, right? You want cultural awareness? Learn metaphors in English. Conceptual metaphors. You see, you're worried about... I get so many students asking me how to learn all these different expressions, all these idioms, all these words, one by one, right? And they're putting all of this effort into memorizing hundreds, even thousands of words, one at a time. Wouldn't it be easier to learn a whole system at once? To understand that you can learn an entire subsystem of the English language by learning one metaphor. So time is money. Wow, you've suddenly learned a whole bunch there. You've learned a whole subsystem of the English language. You really have. And becoming conscious of that metaphor helps you to become conscious of the way you perceive the world and how you are using language as well. And when you can become conscious of how you're using your language, then you can make yourself, you can more clearly express yourself and your meaning, right? And you can also use this to think in English. People ask me sometimes, Gabriel, how can I think in English? How can I learn to think in English? Well, this is one very good way, because when you learn the system, you're learning it independent from translation, right? You don't have to translate in your mind anymore that you can cost someone time, because you're making a link from money to time, right? You're translating from system to system rather than from language to language. And you're thinking in terms of the whole system in place here, the whole conceptual system. Of course, you do have to be aware that sometimes the metaphors only focus on one aspect of the subject. Okay? So, for example, there can be multiple metaphors for one subject. Love. There are many different metaphors for love. Love is a journey. Love is war. Love is a location. There are many different kinds of ways people talk about love through metaphoric language. And each one of those conceptual metaphors will be used in different circumstances. You see, each one looks at only one aspect of what love is. So you wouldn't, if you're talking about how you are, how great love is, you might not want to use the conceptual metaphor, love is war. You might not want to talk about love in terms of war, right? So you might talk about love as a journey or love as a location instead. So you have to be conscious also of the fact that there can be many metaphors for one subject, and that you need to use the right system. And when you're using that system, it is only referring to one part of the subject at a time, you see. You can be creative with metaphors too, right? You can use them in different ways. You can extend the metaphor. You can use previously unused parts of the metaphor, or you can create an entirely new metaphor. But these are highly advanced techniques which go beyond the scope even of this long lesson, okay? Now let's look at orientational metaphors. Now, these are things like up, down, in, out, front, back, on, off, deep, shallow, central, periphery, okay? Very, it might remind you of prepositions, okay? It's very spatial oriented. And what you have to understand is that just like in structural metaphors, the concept is in us trying to see a likeness between two things. In orientational metaphors, the conceptual understanding is it arises from the fact that we have bodies and that we experience the world through our bodies. And so when we are trying to understand something, we will often try to match the concept with our physical experience in the world, right? So it's only natural to see things in a spatial orientation. So that is revealed to us in our language, and we create language that represents our conceptual understanding of experiencing the world physically, okay? So one example is I'm feeling up today, or I'm feeling down today, right? We're not literally up or down, it's our mood. But we relate our feelings, we need to put them into some kind of spatial context in order to understand them and in order to express that to another person. So, here are some examples. Happy is up, sad is down. Conscious is up, unconscious is down. Health and life are up, sickness and death are down. Having control is up, being subject to control is down. More is up, less is down. Good is up, bad is down. Unknown is up, known is down. History is behind us. The future is in front of us. And then, of course, we have all of the ins and outs as well. I mentioned one earlier, in love. You can fall in love, or you can also fall out of love. And it's this understanding of life within a container, right? We impose boundaries on the world even though they're not there. Right, take a forest, for example. You walk a little bit, let's say you walk for 2 minutes through the trees, and then you say, okay, now I'm in the forest. And then you walk 2 minutes back again, and then you say, okay, I'm out of the forest. Now, really, you are creating these boundaries of what is in the forest and what is out of the forest. In reality, there's no forest. There's just lots of trees, right? Our minds have created the concept of a forest for convenience. And so when we created this idea of a forest, right, bunch of trees together, we then impose these boundaries in and out that don't really exist, but we impose them on the forest because that's how we experience the world. And so it's no different. That's how we experience the world through our bodies, right? We experience life as being in our body, and everything else is outside of our bodies. So we impose that on forests and many other physical things, and also on abstract concepts in order to conceptualize those concepts. And then we create these metaphors in order to express how we perceive those concepts. All right? Such as love, such as truth, such as power, right? You can be in power or out of power, such as control. You are in control or you are out of control, right? Many concepts we express through these metaphors, but they're not literal. They're just our conceptual metaphors. Another example might be fashion, right? If something is in season or out of season, right? We impose these boundaries on something that is highly societal, highly conceptual and societal, right? Okay, let me read you a quick quote this time from Mark Johnson in one of his lectures. Okay, this is not from the book, this is from a lecture. Metaphors are not accidental. They are profoundly motivated by our bodily engagement with the world. The way our bodies and environments are structured put us in touch with important aspects of our being. It is only natural to create the metaphors that we do, because this is how we experience the world. There are many cross-cultural similarities with metaphors. Okay, so this shows that not only in English, but also maybe in your language, you can find some of these metaphors too. And when you understand the metaphor, you can not just understand it on an intellectual level, but you can explore it in yourself through your experience of it. So, a lot of my English students, they're afraid to talk about these abstract concepts because they feel that it's really difficult to talk about these kinds of things in another language. But when you understand the power of metaphor and that everything is in metaphorical language, then it becomes a lot easier, right? Because no longer are you thinking in this highly complex way. You only need to make it into a physical way of seeing the world. So if you're talking about freedom or love or truth or power, right? Whatever you're talking about, you can talk about it by understanding it through this orientational metaphor. Okay, so it doesn't have to be hard, right? And like I said, one way of learning all of these metaphors is not only by thinking, but by asking the question, what am I saying if I take it entirely literally? Right? And then feeling it. So let's take in love, for example. Think about, okay, what does that say literally? Oh, in love, I'm in love, and it's kind of funny. And then you think, okay, so let me try and feel that in love. And you might think, I'm swimming in a pool of this emotion, love. And literally by making that visual and spatial connection, it makes the feeling stronger, and therefore the connection of learning the language becomes stronger. It becomes more memorable, right? So you form new connections to that experience. You've got the language and now the experience of the metaphor now. So it becomes powerful. All right. A lot to take in there, I know. But here's the key, okay? Start to learn metaphors, the English language conceptual metaphors, because when you understand the conceptual metaphors, you understand the whole system at once, right? Lots of different subsystems, and you can then learn many expressions and words in one day by just understanding the metaphor. It's like you're not just learning one new thing, you're learning that new thing and all of the connections that come with it. All right? So I'm going to give you some homework. 3 questions. Number 1, what metaphors can you find with books? Okay? With the subject book. So a book is... Okay, what are the conceptual structural metaphors with a book? A book is what? Think about the language that you know to do with a book, okay? Question 2, what are the orientational metaphors for learning? What are the orientational metaphors for the subject learning? And number 3, what are the benefits of the learning English path metaphor? So that learning English is a path, or that learning English is a journey. Okay? I created this channel name for a reason. And what do you think the benefits are? What are the advantages of looking at learning English as a path? Keep learning, my friend, and keep going.